It's a special edition of the Buck Stops here, and I have got someone who's been in a lot of my committee meetings, and I'm really excited to sort of do a one-on-one with Dave Whitlock, or as I know him, Longhorn Dave.
That's me. Yep, Longhorn Dave. I'm down here in Houston, Texas. I went to University of Texas, hence the Longhorn part. I appreciated you on one of our shows. You're wearing the Longhorn gear. We didn't we didn't plan that,
No,
but
I didn't.
But you know, I like sports across the board, and I like blogging. I like doing podcasts. I like doing video logs. I like doing all this stuff. Just I like to talk sports with people that are interested. And so this is just a great opportunity. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your fandom first. I see you represent. Please tell me I'm right. Is that like an original Colt 45?
Yeah, it is. It's not original. You know, these days they got all the vintage and collection stuff. But yeah, certainly the Colt 45s. Not that I was alive for that, but you know, I think it was 62. The Houston got a Major League Baseball team, the Colt 45s. They played outdoors at Colt Stadium. It was a wild success in terms of getting baseball here in the Southwest at the time. But you know, of course, the heat and mosquitoes quickly chased them into the Astrodome, and once Judge Hoffheinz built that, they changed the name to the Astros. But I like to represent the vintage, the old school here, those few years that they were the 45.
You know, it's funny you bring up that name, Vinny Laspinuso, a friend of ours. So I gave him a special show where he can just make the Hall of Fame case for, and he goes pretty obscure, but he just made it for Roy Hoffheinz.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
I've interacted
coming up.
I've interacted with Vinny a couple of times on that because you know, Roy Hoffheinz clearly, you know, redefined kind of the way baseball was thought about in terms of an indoor sport and things like that. And so he's a legend down here. The University of Houston basketball court was named after him for a long time. It just got recently renamed after Tillman Fertitta for new money over old money. But Judge Roy Hoffheinz was a big, you know, if you think about it at the time, you know, Houston sports wasn't really on the map yet. You know, the Oilers were in the old AFL. The Rockets weren't here yet, and you know, there was just a minor league team. And so his ability to get the 45s here, get the Astrodome built, which was key to having a successful franchise here in Houston. It just would struggle otherwise. You know, certainly was very, very important to Houston sports in general.
So growing up, then you obviously you were a fan of the Oilers at that point in time. So like, was that like the first like gut punch when they moved to Tennessee for you as a fan?
That was tough. It was, yeah. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s following the Oilers and the Astros and Rockets. And then, yeah, when the Oilers, and that was just a messy divorce with Bud Adams, you know, putting his foot down, you know, with the Astrodome and basically saying that it wasn't going to work for him, and the city, tired of him, you know, taking him to the cleaners. They left about the time, I guess I was in college. And so, you know, if you remember, they'd gone through this heyday with a run and shoot, a lot of successful, you know, outcomes and playoff runs, never even made the AFC Championship game, which is sad. And then they went ahead and broke them up. And so they're really lousy for a couple of years. And about the time they started to rebuild with, they drafted Eddie George and Steve McNair in back-to-back drafts with early draft picks. Both of them played for the Oilers 1 or 2 years, and then of course they moved. And it was kind of, it wasn't like some of the teams or cities that felt like they were shunned. We were tired of Bud Adams. We were kind of like, get out of here and take your horse with you. But you know, at the same time, it left that gap, you know, which actually was relatively quickly filled, you know, with the Texans, which has been a different sob story altogether. But
yes.
But you know, so it just kind of ended, and it was frustrating. But you know, the Oilers still live in a lot of people's hearts. There's a lot of great Twitter accounts that really follow them and retweet their.
Oh, that's what I should have wore. I just bought a vintage Houston Oilers t-shirt.
Nice.
Yeah. I should have wore that, but I'm in the middle of packing everything because, as Vinny likes to remind me, I'm the only person who's voluntarily moving from Barbados to Winnipeg.
Right. Yeah, you may be the first person in history to do that.
Well, it depends on who gets off the plane first, myself or my wife.
Right.
Or my dog.
Yeah.
Could be him too. So Houston. So growing up in Houston, how would you classify the fan base there? Like, well, and I'm just trying to think of this as a Canadian growing up. When people think of Texas sports, Dallas usually comes to mind. How does Houston compare to Dallas? Because Houston's a much bigger city, is it not?
Yeah, Houston is a bigger city proper, but if you combine what they call the Metroplex, the Dallas and Fort Worth and suburbs Metroplex, it's definitely a bit larger there than here. So if you talk about markets and sports markets, Dallas would be higher on pretty much any list that you would see. Even because Houston's the fourth largest American city, about to pass Chicago, just because of the way Chicago demographics are working and people not moving into the city and people coming to Texas for business and other reasons, and oil and gas and medical and all that. But yeah, it's a strong fan base, but it's not, I wouldn't say near as rabid as you would say, like even in New York, Chicago, Boston, those type of places.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of where I was going with that.
Right.
Yeah. Houston once had a WHA team, the Arrows, with Gordie Howe. Again, hockey's sort of my first love for obvious reasons, I suppose. I've been very impressed in the last 10 years watching hockey grow in the Southern United States. I never thought I would see people in Nashville get that excited. Tampa, Dallas for another reason. I mean, like for me, it wasn't necessarily a kick in the gut, but for me, visualizing, when I think of American hockey, I think of Boston or I think of Minnesota. And so when the North Stars moved to Dallas, it's like, this doesn't make any sense. But Dallas is really taken to them. Houston, I would think, would be a great place for expansion. What do you see?
Yeah, it's definitely a topic down here, and there's like I think a Twitter account, NHL to Houston. There may be some underscores in there that's really advocated it, and I follow and retweet their stuff. There's some serious either flirtation or rumors about Arizona. You know, that whole situation with their arena that they had to abandon and find a new one, and they're debt laden and all that, and doesn't seem to be taken there. With Houston via Phil. I think it could pass and grow. They had a minor league team here, the Houston Aeros, named after the old WHA team, but it failed, and this was probably in the 2000s, 2000, 2010. It failed in the model that they had they were, I think, the Minnesota Wild's AAA, or not AAA team, but highest level team. But the challenge was they were basically, because it was at like the Rockets arena and the rental cost for that, it ended up being kind of NHL prices for minor league hockey. I mean, if I think of minor league hockey, I'd expect, maybe some $5-10 tickets, some $4 or $5 beers, but it was more like, $40 to $50 to get in, plus another, the same as the food prices, beer prices, same as Rockets. And so it didn't quite, that model didn't fit. Then they moved to Iowa, and then they immediately published the prices in wherever they played in Iowa, which is probably, I'll just generally say, a barn somewhere. And it was, $10 tickets, $2 beers. And it was like, well, it's just a different model, so if it'd probably be in the Rockets arena, Toyota Center. I think it could work. I think there's enough of a fan base down here. It's been so long since we've had a professional team, it would have to grow, but that's not unusual for, like you mentioned, a city like Nashville or Columbus or some of these maybe the other cities that haven't had a traditional team.
Charlotte, I mean, also with the Hurricanes.
Right, the Carolina, and they've had success. Tampa Bay is one of the great franchises.
Actually, no, they're in Raleigh, but yeah, still, I mean, like these are really growing fan bases in the South, except for Atlanta. It's failed twice.
Yeah.
And I just don't see it ever working there. With Phoenix, I actually spoke to someone, I can't say who, because this was off the record, but he said pretty much what killed it for that is when they took it from Phoenix to Glendale. And that people were going to support the Coyotes if they could sort of like do that in the downtown core, but where they put it there, they're going to make the effort to go to the NFL. They're not mentally ready in that area to go to the NHL, and it is a shame. I want to promote your site. So where can people find that? And also want to do your weekly, because you do this great thing with the weekly Sportsman of the Week.
That's right. Yeah. So my original regular personal Twitter handle was Longhorn Dave, and so I tweeted about whatever was coming in my mind, sports or otherwise. And I finally thought, what I really want to do is transition to a Twitter that's only sports. That way, when I go on this account and tweet about it, I could just tweet about sports ad nauseum. People that don't like sports could follow my other account. And then that kind of birthed a blog. This is the 2009-10 time frame. And I said, you know what, I've always got thoughts on my head. I want to write about something, tell everybody what I think, and my opinion is the most important one, obviously.
Well, of course.
So I started an LHD on sport, Longhorn Dave on sports. So a spinoff of my personal account. And I was tweeting about things. They can find
LHD hyphen on.
Yeah, let me see. www.lhd-on-sports.com.
Okay.
So appreciate that. I have to look it up myself. I can't remember if I wrote it out or not. I just
these damn hyphens and underscores.
Right.
Damn your keyboard.
Right. Right. So I'd write about that, but at the really the advent of Twitter, it became to me less interesting to put in long form blogs when everybody was tweeting about whatever in real time. And so I put that aside a little bit. I still have a few exceptions, but I said, what I really want to do is I would see some sports events every weekend, and I watch across the spectrum of sports. I said, wow, that was a really great performance by this player or that team or whatever. Maybe if I just start a blog highlighting a sportsman or sportswoman of the week, just to capture that individual effort, that one thing that put a team over the top. And so I started January 1st, 2012. So that was my 2012 New Year's resolution, was to do this thing every week where I just promote a sports person of the week, typically a sportsman, every now and then a sportswoman. And the criteria is just pretty simple. Somebody that just kind of set themselves apart from the rest of the sports world that weekend. It could, in some cases, it's clearly the Super Bowl MVP quarterback performance. In other cases, I like to look at smaller sports and sports that aren't as much in the mainstream media and say, well, this person over here really did something special, even though, I caught an article or read about it or followed, may not have even watched the event, but this was something unique to sports, and I wanted to kind of bring that to folks.
So what would have been your most obscure person that maybe has been the sportsman of the week?
Yeah, so there's been lots of the major sports, baseball, football, get the attention, but I've had 3 times an Iditarod winner has been my sportsman of the week.
Yeah.
So
nice.
One time there was a yachting winner, probably the America's Cup, and then there was one thing to think about was, and I was pushed by a friend on this one, but I did a major league eating champion, and after Joey Chestnut won for the 58th time in a row, setting his own record, I said, you know what, it's worth recognizing this as a sport, and at least, why not? Maybe get some different views in, different perspective. Certainly there's lots of sports I can and can't play, and that's one I can't play. So I can appreciate the athleticism of it.
I actually saw a documentary on competitive eating camp. Or I drink a lot, so I might have thought it was something else, but I could have sworn that I actually saw people practice and learn how to do that.
Yep.
There must be something to it, because the people who were winning, what was it? Was that Kobayashi? Was he like 120 pounds or something like that?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Just a little guy with a hollow leg, I guess. And just like other sports labor disagreements, he's fell out of favor with the sanctioning leagues in this thing. So he hasn't competed with Chestnut for a few.
Really? Is that what happened?
Yeah. They're almost like wrestlers or boxers. There's a promoter that's got to sign them and get them there. And if they don't agree to the terms, they can't.
I'm trying to imagine the Don King of the competitive eating circuit.
Right.
It's so strange. Oh my God. Evan Nolan, my partner on the Weekly Hall of Fame show, he openly says it, that he ripped off his Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of the week from you. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a great, because each week has its own personality in sports. We have this sports cycle, and having done it 10 years, you go through the football seasons, the championship weeks, the playoffs in certain sports. And, just as an example, so, the last 3 weeks we've had the Olympics playing, And so I typically, when the Olympics play, I like to reach out to some sort of Olympian because it's probably their only chance to shine. I think back to, Simone Biles a couple times. There's not going to be another chance to recognize a great athlete like Simone Biles, except during the Olympics.
She's a native of Houston, is she not?
She is, yeah.
Yeah.
She's dating and now engaged to one of the Texans' safeties.
Yes. So yeah.
That was.
Did you see her first pitch?
I did, yes.
Oh my God.
Right.
I sent that to Evan and he was saying to me, you're being sarcastic, because he told me like he thinks that she's the greatest athlete, period. And I disagreed. Right. I said, well, and then I said, well, but you have to see her first pitch. And he says, you're being an asshole. Like, no, see her first pitch. Right. It is that good.
Yeah.
So anyone listening, watching, YouTube, Simone Biles, first pitch. Oh my God. Yeah. No one's gonna top that.
Right. So we had the Olympics the last 3 weeks, but in these 3 weeks, we've also had the Super Bowl. So if I'm going to pick a sportsman or sportswoman of the week, that becomes a competition, right? Like, do I pick one from the Super Bowl? Do I look towards Olympics? And even this weekend, I just released my blog. By the time you release this, it'll be well out. But I thought, we have the last weekend of the Olympics as well as the Daytona 500. So that's another major, Daytona 500, things like the Masters, the Tour de France, Kentucky Derby, all those things typically. And so you had this competition that I wasn't sure which way to go. But then you look at like this week, and I was thinking like, well, this week is just a low week in sports. There's not a major competition. We're past the Olympics. March Madness is a couple weeks away. So, this is the kind of week where a sports person of the week may be somebody that's just kind of an NBA or NHL player of the week, because there's just not that much. So it's almost about like how good you are that week versus your competition, because you could win a major golf or tennis tournament, but if it happens to be the week that the Super Bowl was played or some other major thing happened, a no-hitter is another one that's a big one for me. I'm a baseball fan, so if you pitch a no-hitter, that kind of puts you in the top of the conversation. So if you pitch a no-hitter the same week that somebody wins a Grand Slam in tennis, it can create a decision, which is fun, right? And
do you try to avoid replicating?
I do, yeah. So if you win one, then it becomes more difficult to win the second one, in my opinion. So if I'm looking at those that are, well, he or she's already won one or two, and here's the new person, I'm probably going to pick the new person because that new person, may not get a chance. And so I've gone up to 3 with athletes. There's been several 3-timers. I don't know if there'll ever be a 4-timer.
So who's that?
That is, again, going back 10 years, you're talking Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or LeBron James, Stephon Curry, even Chris Froome in cycling. I'm a big cycling fan, and he won.
I don't even know that name.
Yeah, Chris Froome. He won several Tour de France's in a row. And
where's he from? He's not American, is he?
He's a Great Britain. But I think he has some Kenyan roots too, but he's pretty much British. And the Sportsman of the Week is not an American thing. I go across the board in terms, and the United Kingdom has won 11. I've got my table up here. Australia 5, Spain 5. Nice. Of the Spanish 5, Nadal is 3 of them. No, he's only 2 of them. Probably Alberto Contador, cyclist, was probably another one. So yeah, the repetition becomes a challenge. There's some maybe surprise 3 times winners. Let me see some potentially John Velasquez, the jockey, Nick Foles, the quarterback. He's had 3 really good weeks where he did things like win Super Bowls and
someone who we will never talk about in our Pro Football Hall of Fame committee too.
Exactly. Yeah. So so and there he is, well ahead of guys that are clear Hall of Famers. So it can go, I want to manage it because you don't want to have, particularly in the NBA, it becomes difficult because the same teams win every year typically, and the same stars tend to rise. And so I hold it to a little different standard. And I say, okay, like LeBron James, last time he won, it was when he came back from 3-1 against the Warriors, right? The Warriors were up 3-1, and he pretty much single-handedly won the next 3 games. I was like, okay, that's your 3rd crown there.
I would imagine too in the summer, I mean, it's obviously baseball centric. So it might be more, not necessarily, I know you're a big baseball fan from what you've said, but I would imagine that baseball players, just because they've got this 3-month window to themselves, for the
Right.
most part.
Yeah, that has played out. Baseball has had the most. Typically, that manifests itself in the July, August timeframe when hockey and basketball wind down. I mean, but also summer, you've got Wimbledon, French Open, you've got the United States Golf Open, you've got the British Open, and so there's several other opportunities that I look for to break that up. Once really August tends to be baseball because the others have ended, football hadn't started yet. Then kind of once football starts, you start playing between pro, college, and then the Major League Baseball postseason. And so it becomes a real cutthroat competition. You know, if you have a good weekend in September in baseball, you may be outflanked by a quarterback in college football that, you know, won the big game with 400 yards passing and 5 touchdowns or whatever. So
yeah, I do a similar thing on the weekly show where I do elevator up, elevator down.
Yep.
And sometimes I just don't have one.
Yeah.
You know, and I always sort of look at it from a Hall of Fame point of view, like who's got that. And sometimes because I also look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it might be just I had Adele as an elevator up because everyone loves her new album.
Right.
That's 3 in a row for somebody who's just getting all this. And like last week, it was like, I mean, I could have. It was so easy because of the Super Bowl. Well, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. You've got a new show that I just checked out, and tell everyone about that because you've got a new. Is it going to be weekly, bi-weekly?
Yeah, probably a special season. So I mentioned earlier, so I do this weekly blog and I try to maintain that, and that at least keeps the continuity going. And then other places I've fallen off of, not, like I said, I don't really want to share my opinion on the MLB lockout or this, that, or the other. Doesn't seem to add much to the context of what's already on Twitter. But a couple areas I do like to do is the Baseball Hall of Fame. Love to talk about that, which we talked about on your previous podcast. And I like to do sports.
Sometimes I'm sober for it too.
Sometimes, not always though, which is good. You know,
that's why I said sometimes.
Right. So, and then I like to do.
Now that it's video, I kind of have to be.
So you got to execute it.
No, I've still screwed up a few times. Canadian, what can I say?
Yeah, you know, or no other way about it. I also like to do a little bit of sports, and I'm not a gambling website, I'm not a forecasting website, but I do like to participate in competitions online where you pick winners of games against the spread, straight up, whatever. And so typically in years past, I've done blogs where you just break down the top 5 college games of the week, or particularly in the NFL, the playoffs, where you can really rack and stack. And everybody's, of course, talking about the games, and they all come out. You got 4 games to pick, and you got a whole week to do it. And so I found a good partner online, Kimberly Moten, who's just somebody I kept interacting with on weekends. We'd follow the games, pro and college. She's a big Georgia fan, big Carolina Panthers fan, and we would just interact.
I saw that on her Twitter. I followed her anyway.
Yeah, good.
Saints fans.
Yeah. Long suffering. I'll at least say that. Long suffering Bulldogs fans.
Yeah.
Or you talking about the Panthers fans?
Well, yeah. For Carolina, yeah.
Carolina, I got you. Yeah, no, and that's another long suffering fan. But we just interacted, and I said, you know, hey, it'd be fun to just get on a show like this and just go back and forth and bounce back thoughts on the game. We're 2 amateurs. We're not sitting there with a bunch of stats like the pros would be and say, well, they get 244 yards per game passing, and you know, with this particular 2.3
sometimes that's more fun.
It's just like, you know, hey, I saw that offensive line last week and they look like crap. Like, I think they may not be able to hold up, or, you know, I was impressed with this player.
Yeah.
And so we had fun. We did shows before 3 of the 4 weeks. 1 week I was on vacation. So we may pick it up next fall. There's no plans to do anything in the off season to break down the games, but it was fun to, like, you know, like this, pull somebody on, get to know them, you know, engage and get their thoughts from a different geographical perspective, different background, different.
That is fun. That is, yeah. Like in the groups that you and I are a part of, we've tried to get it as much geographic as possible. I don't have as many West Coast people as I would like.
Yeah,
True.
you got the Oakland guy, but
Well, not just an Oakland guy. That's Wayne Mabry. That's the NFL fan. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer.
He's a violator. So
Yeah.
I'm damn proud that I have him as a part of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, gotta get some people from the Pacific Northwest, Midwest.
Yeah.
Not a Canadian living in Barbados. I don't represent any of them.
Well, you're a very, very specific demographic, but
yes, I am that for sure.
I did look up, and we've had one winner from Winnipeg that was the Sportsman of the Week.
Who's
Let me
that?
see who it was. Patrick Lane on in February of 2017.
Look at that.
And you know what? It was about this week, and so it was probably a little bit of dead time between the Super Bowl and March Madness, where I was just looking for somebody
Nice.
kind of round out a a good performance.
It's funny. I know I'm moving there, so like I watched the Jets game already this afternoon. So damn it, they lost.
Right. You have to be mad now, even though you wouldn't have been mad before.
Not real. I grew up a Quebec Nordiques fan of all things.
Okay. Yeah.
That's actually how I became a Saints fan, believe it or not.
How's that connection?
Okay, so first thing I started watching was hockey. So because I idolized one of my older cousins who loved the Quebec Nordiques, so that was my team. Now you look at the fleur de lis on the side of the jersey.
Yeah.
So then you start watching NFL, and when you're growing up in Ontario, at that point, Buffalo was crap. So it wasn't like there was, and this is like in the days, I don't have to tell you, right, where it's not like you could get any game you wanted. So like a little 7-year-old me, like, hey, there's the fleur de lis. Not that I even knew what that was on the same helmet, and that was my team, and that's been my team ever since.
No, don't underestimate the helmet attraction to fandom, because I grew up liking the Dolphins and the Chargers, mainly because I thought that, the Dolphin was a cool little mascot on the side of the helmet, and the Chargers, I mean, they had the lightning bolt, which is just really, really cool. Of course, Oilers too, but like when I watched other teams and the Cowboys star, even back then, Houston and Dallas weren't as much, I guess, rivals. It's like everybody cheered for each other, and then at some point we had to start being like, oh, I don't like you because you that other side of the state or whatever. But no, yeah, that makes sense. So the Nordiques moved to Colorado, right?
And I couldn't follow Colorado because at that point I was like Captain Canada and all this stuff in my life, and then I moved to Ottawa for college, so I became a Sens fan, and that's been my team since. And this still will be, but it's. If I'm going to be living in Winnipeg, and it looks like I'll probably be going to a lot of Jets games because that's what I'm going to plan to do. So
jump on board.
Bring it on. Yeah, I got to go do some CFL stuff.
Right?
Yeah, because we do things like in
Blue Bombers.
Three downs.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on for this. Again, where can the people follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, it's at LHD on sports. I think that's the underscores. And then my blog is LHD-on-sports.com.
All right. Thanks so much. Wherever you are, stay safe, everybody.
Awesome.